When you take responsibility for your response, you actually change the entire dynamic. The next time you feel hooked by your teen's behavior, pause and name the difference between what's not in your control and what is. You might literally say to yourself, I can't control their mood, but I can control my response. Or you might say, I can't control whether they're motivated today, but I can control whether I stay grounded and clear. Or I can't control whether they're upset, but I can control my boundary and my follow through. And that shift keeps you out of a fight you can't win and puts you back in the seat of leadership. Welcome to Parents and Teens Rising, the podcast that bridges the gap between parents and teens and helps families thrive. I'm Jasmine Chandler, teen and parent coach, wilderness rites of passage guide, and founder of Guided Passages. After over 16 years of working with young people, I know how challenging and rewarding these years can be. Each week, we'll explore real conversations, practical tools, and fresh perspectives to help you connect with your teen, support their confidence, and navigate the ups and downs. Let's rise together. Hey everyone, welcome back into the podcast. If you are watching the video version of this podcast today, you'll notice that I'm sitting in my car. I am actually at a volleyball tournament right now for my daughter. We're in between games, and this is the time I had for this moment of recording. So you might hear a little bit of rain outside the window. It's actually pouring rain over here in Southern Oregon right now, which is amazing because we haven't had rain in almost a month straight. It's been the driest winter I can remember. So it's really nice to get some rain right now. And you might hear a little bit of that. And yeah, you're just going to kind of witness me making this work in the midst of all the busy things. You know, when you've got volleyball tournaments for the entire weekend, all weekend long, and a busy work schedule, it's like you just fit things in where you can. So I'm happy to be here with you today. And I'm going to be talking about something that I think impacts all of us so much. So this is something that really sounds simple, but I honestly think it has the power to change absolutely everything in your relationship with your teen, including how much influence you have over the behaviors and choices they make. So it's really starting to learn to notice in real time what's in your control versus what's not in your control, and then choosing to put your energy in the right place. Because here's what most of us do when our teen is struggling, acting out, shutting down, or bringing a ton of attitude into the house. We feel it in our body immediately. Our nervous system tightens, our mind starts spinning, and we go straight into trying to control the thing that's upsetting us. We try to shut down the attitude, shut down the disrespect, shut down the meltdown, shut down the mood. And it makes sense because we care, right? We want peace, we want connection, we want our kids to be respectful and okay. But the second we try to control what we actually can't control, it almost always backfires. So picture this, your teen comes home and you can feel the energy the second they walk in the door. Maybe it's their tone or their eye roll, or maybe it's the way they drop their bag. Maybe it's the one word answer that has an edge to it. And you're standing there thinking, my God, here we go. And you can feel yourself getting triggered because it feels really personal and maybe even disrespectful. And you might think something like, I've been doing all this work for you and you're going to talk to me like that? And when this happens to me, a big part of me wants to control the situation by clamping down. I might want to say something like, you can't talk to me like that. That is so rude. I might want to jump straight into a lecture, or my own tone might get really sharp and defensive, or basically just try to force respect in a moment when their nervous system is already hot and mine is starting to get really hot too. And if I go down that road, I might feel really powerful or in charge for about 12 seconds. But what I create is more disconnection and more escalation. They'll get more defensive, I'll get more activated, and now we're going to be in a power struggle. And now the whole house feels tense. And even if they back off on the surface, what I've really done is push them farther away and raise the temperature for the rest of the day. But there is another option, and this is where a shift of focus can change everything, because I can't control my teen's mood when they walk in the door. I can't control what happened at school. I can't control whether they're hungry or overstimulated or embarrassed or frustrated or carrying something that they don't know how to talk about yet. I can't control whether they come home with an attitude. But what I can control is what happens inside of me and what I do next. And that's where my influence lives. That's where my power lives. So in that moment, when they've walked through the door grumpy and with lots of attitude, if I notice that I'm triggered, then I can slow myself down. I can take a breath. I can remind myself, this isn't an emergency. I can give myself the tiniest pause before I speak. And then I can get curious and say something like, hey, is everything okay? Or I can tell you're a little upset right now. I'm going to give you some space and maybe a snack. And then we're going to talk about this later. So, one of our parental superpowers is to actually not try to resolve everything in the heat of the moment and to not push for more engagement when emotions are already high. So, I don't demand a full conversation. I don't try to force them into emotional closeness when they're not regulated enough to access it. I give them the space they need to downshift, and I set a clear and calm boundary if needed. Anything that needs resolution is going to be resolved so much better and faster if we wait till everyone's calm, and that part is in my control. So later, when we're both calm, that's when I can come back, and that's when my influence is actually possible. And that's when I can say, hey, earlier when you came in, it didn't really feel that good to me. So I want to check in. What was going on for you? Or I could say something like, I'm not okay with being spoken to that way, and I want us to figure out a better way to handle it next time. And that conversation is going to land so much differently because nobody's in fight or flight mode. Nobody's trying to win in that moment. We're actually just talking. And this is why trying to control your teen's feelings and behavior in the moment backfires so often because you can't control how they feel. And the more you try, the more resistance you get. But when you let them have their experience and you focus on your response, you protect your connection, you hold your boundaries, and you create the conditions where influence actually works. And this is exactly what Stephen Covey was pointing out when he talked about the circle of influence in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's not that you do nothing, it's that you stop wasting energy fighting reality and you start leading the parts that are yours to lead. I usually refer to it as the circle of control because it reminds me of the parts of any situation that are outside of my control and the parts that are inside of my control. And one quote I love on this topic comes from Mel Robbins in her book, The Let Them Theory. She says, let them fail, let them be rejected, let them live their lives. By giving them space to grow, you create the opportunity for them to truly learn and become independent. And what I love about this quote is that it brings this idea into all the other areas of our teenagers' lives that we also can't control, like their relationships, the choices they make, whether or not they win or lose, the goals they have, the ways they express themselves, and on and on. They are their own people. They are not mine to control. They are mine to guide and to protect and to be a role model for, but they are their own people with their own thoughts, their own dreams, their own ideas, their own identity, and their own personality. And I don't actually want to control that. I want to help them be the most authentic versions of themselves while learning important values like respect and empathy and perseverance. So, as Mel Robbins would say, I want to let them and then let me be in control of my own response. So, in order for our teens to grow, that requires experience. And experience includes discomfort. It includes mistakes. It includes consequences. It includes learning the hard way sometimes. And it includes distress and big emotions and all of those things. And as much as we want to protect our kids from pain, if we remove every hard moment, we also remove the conditions where resilience is built. They actually need to learn that they can experience hard things and that they can do hard things in order to build their own capacity and their own confidence. And that requires me to let go of my death grip on control. And for someone like me who is a total control freak, that's not an easy task. And I'm guessing a lot of you can relate because I feel like moms in general really try to grip tight to control because we're trying to keep everyone safe and keep the ship running and all the things. So it's not an easy task. And it asks me to be uncomfortable too. But that discomfort is also the place where I grow and evolve for the better. So here's where I want to make something really clear because I think this part really matters. Let them doesn't mean let it slide. It doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean you let your teen run the house. It means you stop trying to control what you can't and you put your energy into what you can. And what you can control is a lot more powerful than it sounds. You can control whether you take the bait when your teen is spicy. You can control whether you match their energy or stay grounded. You can control whether you pause before you respond. You can control whether you lead with curiosity or you lead with accusation. You can control whether you set a boundary you'll actually follow through on or whether you make a threat you won't enforce. And you can control your own nervous system. And that one matters more than most people realize because your teen is always reacting to the emotional climate in the house, even when they act like they don't care. So let's take this beyond the attitude example for a second and talk about a few other places where parents often get stuck. One really big one is emotional meltdowns. So if your teen melts down, you can't control whether the wave comes, but you can control what you do when it hits. And you can decide that your job isn't to talk them out of their feelings or to punish them for having their feelings. Your job is just to keep things safe and contained and for you to stay anchored. When you stay anchored, you're not just helping your teen calm down, you're also showing them what it looks like to move through intensity without blowing everything up. And that's using your influence, right? That's using the power of co regulation. Another big one is follow through. So maybe they agree to do something and then it doesn't happen, right? Like I know we all deal with that all the time. And you can feel that frustration really build because you're carrying the mental load again because now you have to like deal with it, right? It's not taken care of. And so what happens next? But you can't control whether your team magically becomes consistent overnight. You can, however, control the structure. You can control the expectation. You can control whether you fall into the cycle of reminding and nagging and then resentfully doing it yourself and having all kinds of passive aggressive energy. And you can control your follow through. And this is where a lot of parents accidentally lose influence because they'll say something like, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And then the consequence doesn't happen. And it's not because we're weak, but because we're tired or it feels like too much to deal with, or we just know it's going to create a huge explosion or whatever the consequence might be if we hold the line. And I get it, right? I totally get it. It happens in my house as well. But the reality is that consistency is what creates trust. And it's what teaches your teen that your words mean something. So a boundary here might sound like, here's the agreement. If it's not done by this time, then this is the outcome. And then you stay calm and you follow through. We don't have to lecture or give speeches or extra punishment. We just have to be consistent. Motivation is also another one that brings up a lot for parents. So when your teen seems unmotivated, it can feel like you're watching their future slip away. And that fear can make us clamp down harder or do too much for our teens. But motivation is internal. We can't force it. What we can do is influence it by creating structure, by supporting skill building, and by helping them connect to their own why, and by not letting our fear turn into controlling behavior. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do when your teen is stuck is to hold the line with love and steadiness and to stop rescuing and to stop managing and to stop doing the emotional work for them. Again, it's not because we don't care. It's because we do care and we want them to build the muscles they're going to need for their life. And this is the part that I think parents need to hear the most. Focusing on what you can control isn't smaller, it's not less important. It's actually the highest leverage thing you can do because when you take responsibility for your response, you actually change the entire dynamic. So now I want to talk about boundaries for a second because boundaries are the bridge between giving your teen space to grow and still being the parent. A boundary is not about controlling your teen's behavior. You controlling you. It's you deciding what you're available for and what you're not. It's you deciding what you're going to do if the line gets crossed. So instead of saying, you can't talk to me like that, which often turns into a battle, you can say, I'm going to take a pause and we can try again later. Or instead of, you need to calm down right now, you can say, this is important and I want to talk about this. And we're going to do it when we're both calm. And instead of saying, you have to do your homework right now, it becomes, here's the expectation and here's what happens if it's not done. And then we just follow through. And I also want to just zoom out for a second because I think this idea matters not just in parenting, but in life in general. So when the world feels heavy, which it does right now for so many of us, and when the news cycle is so intense, and when there's uncertainty and stress, our nervous systems get really stretched thin. And when we're already stretched thin, we're way more likely to feel helpless at home too. We're way more likely to react and we're way more likely to control what we can't. It's so important that we're taking care of ourselves, that we are giving ourselves some time and space to decompress, right? That we are pausing the news cycle sometimes so that we're not constantly having to manage while trying to keep our nervous systems regulated. And action is such an antidote to helplessness. So, not giant action that fixes everything overnight, but grounded, aligned action in the places where you actually have influence. So, in parenting, action might be practicing the pause. It might be holding one boundary consistently instead of trying to hold 10 boundaries inconsistently. It might be repairing after you snapped instead of carrying guilt. It might be doing your own inner work around triggers so you don't keep getting hijacked. Or it might look like getting support for yourself because we were not meant to do this alone. But this can really be applied to so many different areas of our life, right? If I'm thinking about everything that's out of control in the world right now, which can be so overwhelming, especially for someone with empathy, right? If you're an empathetic person, you feel what's happening for our communities, you feel what's happening across the world, you just feel it all, right? And it can feel so overwhelming because it's like, what can we do? What can me as one individual do to make an impact or influence the situation? But tiny little micro actions like making phone calls, calling your representatives, or showing up to a school board meeting or showing up to a town hall, all these different things, these tiny little actions can really help us to feel like we're doing something that is influencing the bigger picture. We can also think of this circle of control analogy when it comes to our relationships with our partners or with our coworkers or with our workplace, right? Like what part is in my control and what part is outside of my control? And what's one small action I can take that's going to move me in a direction that's going to feel helpful today instead of keeping me stuck or feeling overwhelmed or powerless? So, if you want a simple takeaway from today, it's this. The next time you feel hooked by your teen's behavior, pause and name the difference between what's not in your control and what is. You might literally say to yourself, I can't control their mood, but I can control my response. Or you might say, I can't control whether they're motivated today, but I can control whether I stay grounded and clear. Or I can't control whether they're upset, but I can control my boundary and my follow through. And that shift keeps you out of a fight you can't win and puts you back in the seat of leadership, which is where your teen actually benefits most. All right, I'm going to leave it there for today. If this landed, I'd love to hear what your control shift is right now. What's one thing you're ready to stop trying to control with your teen? And what's one thing you're ready to take responsibility for in your own response? So please do send me a DM on Instagram and let me know your thoughts, or just go ahead and share this episode with another parent who might need this reminder. And I hope you all have a beautiful week, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone. Did you enjoy the show? If so, would you take 30 seconds to subscribe so you don't miss an episode? Leave a quick review so more parents can find these conversations, and maybe even share this episode to your stories. And if you want to connect, please send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at jasmine.guidedpassages, and that's Jasmine with a Y. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.